Ryan woke before sunrise. The village was quiet, with only the soft sound of wind moving through the trees. He stepped outside, stretching, and noticed the sky looked strange. Shadows moved across the mountains in the distance, huge and fast. At first he thought they were clouds, but then he saw the shapes, wings, tails, heads glinting in the early light. His heart skipped. People began screaming. Women and children ran from their homes. Some grabbed tools, thinking they could defend themselves. Ryan ran toward the cliffs to get a better view. From there he could see them clearly. Dragons. Real dragons. Massive creatures with scales that shone in silver and gold. Their wings were wide, cutting through the air like sails. Some were black like the night, others red like fire. Ryan froze. The stories had always warned humans about dragons. They were supposed to be dangerous, untamable killers. And yet, these dragons did not attack. They circled slowly above the village, their eyes scanning, watching. One of them descended, landing gently on the open field near the center of the village. It carried something in its mouth, a glowing orb that pulsed with warm light. The villagers stayed frozen, unsure if it was a gift or a trap. Ryan stepped forward, feeling a strange pull. The dragon lowered the orb, placing it carefully on the ground. The light from the orb filled the area, soft and steady. Ryan felt warmth spread through his chest. Somehow this was not meant to harm them. The dragon was enormous. Its scales shimmered silver and its eyes glowed gold. It looked at Ryan as if it understood him. He felt fear but also curiosity. The dragon's gaze held no hostility, only attention. It was as if it had come to judge humanity, not destroy it. Ryan's mind raced. He had always feared the Xerilians, the strongest race in the galaxy. They were conquerors, wiping out planets without mercy. Stories said even dragons feared them, hiding in distant corners of the universe. Yet here, dragons were not hiding, they were protecting humans. What? The village elder Mara ran up behind Ryan, her face pale. "It's here to help," she whispered. "I don't know why, but it came to protect us." Her words did little to ease his fear, but they gave him hope. Ryan knelt beside the glowing orb. The warmth it gave off was comforting. He noticed small symbols on its surface, strange but gentle. As he touched it, a feeling of calm washed over him. He looked up at the dragon. It stepped back slightly, watching him carefully. Ryan realized the dragon trusted him to understand the gift. Suddenly, a loud roar shook the mountains. Other dragons appeared, circling the sky. Some landed near the village, creating protective barriers with their wings. The humans could see the scale and power of these creatures, but also the care in their actions. They did not destroy anything. They seemed to be saying, "We are here. You are safe." Ryan's younger sister, Lyra, ran to him, holding a small basket of supplies. "Ryan, are you okay?" she asked. He nodded, though his hands shook. "I think they are trying to help us," he said. Lyra looked at the dragons, eyes wide. "Why would they care about humans?" she whispered. No one had an answer. But it did not matter. The dragon's presence brought a sense of hope and fear at the same time. People who had lived in fear for generations felt that something was changing. Ryan noticed a pattern. The dragons moved in a circle around the village, always keeping the villagers in the center. He realized they were forming a protective shield. Every dragon seemed to understand its role. They were not mindless beasts. They were intelligent, and their intelligence was something humans could barely grasp. Night fell, but the dragons did not leave. Some perched on cliffs, others flew slowly overhead. The orb continued to glow in the village center. Its light was a quiet promise that humans were not alone. Ryan stayed near it, unable to sleep, watching the dragon's movements. One of them, the silver one, landed beside him. Its breath was warm and he felt no fear, only a strange connection. He whispered to it, unsure if it would understand. "Why are you here? Why protect us?" The dragon only blinked, its golden eyes steady and calm. Ryan realized that words might not matter. This creature was showing him trust and patience, teaching him that humans could be more than just weak beings in the galaxy. Hours passed and Ryan began to plan. The dragons were powerful, yes, but they had chosen humans as allies. Maybe humans could learn from them. Maybe humans could survive the threats of the galaxy if they understood the lessons the dragons were offering. By morning the village had calmed. People cautiously stepped outside, seeing the dragons still circling above. Children laughed quietly, daring each other to approach the glowing orb. Ryan felt a surge of hope. For the first time humans might have a chance, not just to survive but to grow stronger with dragons as their teachers and protectors. Ryan knew that this was only the beginning. The sky had roared and dragons had answered. The strongest race might fear them, But humans now had something to hold on to: courage, allies, and a chance to prove themselves in a galaxy that had never given them a choice. The sun rose, casting golden light across the mountains. The dragons lifted into the sky, wings beating slowly, watching over the village. Ryan stayed on the cliffs, looking at the horizon, heart pounding. He did not know what would come next. But he knew one thing: humans were no longer alone. The dragons had arrived. And with them, the future of humans was about to change forever. Ryan had not slept well since the dragons appeared. Their presence was awe-inspiring, but it also reminded him how small and fragile humans were in the galaxy. He woke early, climbing the cliffs to check the skies. Ilir, the silver dragon, hovered above, wings slicing through the morning light. Its golden eyes seemed to follow him wherever he moved. Ryan felt a strange calm in its gaze, as if the dragon wanted him to understand something important. The village had begun to recover from the shock. People cautiously returned to work, repairing homes and tending gardens. Still, fear lingered. Humans had long believed that the galaxy was a dangerous place, and stories of the Xerilians, the strongest and cruelest race, haunted them. Ships that could destroy entire planets, weapons that could erase cities in moments. Humans were easy prey. Ilir circled the cliffs, then landed near Ryan. Its wings made a soft whoosh and its presence filled the air. Ryan knew he could not stay idle. The dragons had come not just as protectors but as teachers. They had shown humans their power, but they also expected humans to learn. Ryan touched the dragon's scaled chest, feeling warmth and strength. "You must understand," he whispered, though he did not know if the dragon could hear him. "We cannot just hide anymore. They will come. The Xerilians will come." Ilir blinked slowly, then nudged Ryan toward the valley below. Ryan understood. It was time to explore, to see what threats were coming, and to prepare. He gathered a few villagers who were willing to follow him, farmers, hunters, and craftsmen, and explained what he had seen. Some were frightened, but others were curious. They traveled across the mountains, guided by Ilir. Along the way, Ryan learned about the dragons. Each had a role in the galaxy. They were not random creatures. They watched the stars, studied the movements of fleets, and intervened only when necessary. Humans were rare in the eyes of dragons. Few species earned their protection. Ryan felt the weight of this responsibility. As they walked through a forest, Ryan and the villagers spotted a flicker in the sky. It was a scout ship, small and sleek, moving too fast to hide completely. Ryan's heart sank. The Xerilians had discovered them. He signaled to Ilir, and the dragon rose silently, wings folding as it streaked toward the ship. The villagers froze in fear. They had never seen dragons attack. Ryan braced himself. A flash of light cut through the morning air. The scout ship shuddered as Ilir's plasma strike struck it perfectly, disabling its engines. The ship spiraled down, landing in a clearing. Ryan approached cautiously. Humans had no weapons strong enough to challenge the Xerilians yet, but dragons made the impossible possible. Ilir landed beside the wreck, scanning the area. Its gaze seemed to communicate one thing: humans could survive if they learned to fight wisely, if they worked with dragons. Ryan felt determination ignite inside him. They could not just wait for death to arrive, they had to act. Over the next days, Ryan worked with the villagers. They built simple defenses, traps, and lookouts, guided by the dragons. Each dragon taught in its own way. Ilir showed Ryan patterns of movement in the sky, teaching him how to predict attacks. Finra, the deep blue dragon, demonstrated speed and agility, helping humans understand timing and positioning. Orvin, golden and powerful, taught humans how to use their surroundings to protect themselves, and Lyra, the smallest dragon, taught precision and patience. Humans began to understand. They were weak alone, but with dragons they could become something more. Villagers who once cowered in fear learned to plan ambushes and organize defenses. They saw how dragons communicated silently, how every movement was calculated. Humans copied these strategies, using simple tools and clever thinking. One evening, while Ryan trained near a cliff, he felt a shift in the air. The wind carried a strange energy, a warning. Ilir hovered close, wings spread wide. Ryan looked up and saw a fleet of Xerilian ships approaching from the horizon. The strongest race in the galaxy had come to test humans and dragons. Ryan gathered the villagers. Fear was visible in their eyes, but there was also a spark of courage. They had learned something new. Dragons were not just weapons, they were teachers. Humans could think, adapt, and survive. Ryan explained the plan simply. They would not fight alone. Humans would move with the dragons, using traps and distractions, while dragons struck the enemies directly. The first wave of ships came at night, cloaked in darkness. Humans waited quietly, hidden behind rocks and trees. Dragons moved above, their eyes glowing like stars. Ryan's heart pounded. When the ships attacked, the dragons rose with a roar that shook the valley. Plasma fire cut through the darkness, disabling engines and shields. Humans used the openings, moving quickly to disable smaller crafts and rescue any trapped villagers. By dawn, the sky was quiet. The fleet had retreated, but Ryan knew it was only the beginning. The Xerilians would not stop. Yet something remarkable had happened. Humans had survived. They had acted with strategy and courage, learning from creatures they had once feared. Ryan looked at Ilir, wings folded in calm pride. The dragon's eyes seemed to say, "You are learning. You can endure." Ryan realized that humans had begun a hidden war, one that was not fought with the largest weapons or fastest ships, but with courage, intelligence, and trust. Dragons were their guides, but humans had to grow strong too. And if they could learn, if they could adapt, maybe one day they would be more than just prey. Maybe they could stand as equals in a galaxy ruled by the strongest. Night fell again and humans slept, knowing dragons watched above. The lesson was clear: survival required more than strength. It required patience, learning, and the willingness to fight wisely. Ryan stood on the cliffs, looking at the stars, and whispered, "We will not fail. Not while they are with us." The dragons circled silently overhead, their wings cutting through the darkness. Ryan felt a bond forming, not just between humans and dragons but between humans and hope itself. The hidden war had begun, and with dragons by their side, humans were no longer alone. Ryan woke before sunrise again, but this time, fear had lessened. The dragons had stayed with the village, and humans were beginning to understand their role. Ilir hovered above the cliffs, wings wide and steady. The golden eyes watched Ryan as he gathered the villagers for another day of training. Ryan had learned much from the dragons, but he knew there was more to understand. Dragons were not just powerful, they were clever, patient, and careful. They planned their moves, watched the sky, and thought ahead. Humans had strength in numbers, but dragons had strategy. If humans wanted to survive, they had to learn this wisdom. The villagers were eager, some more than others. Farmers and hunters had simple tools, but dragons taught them how to use the environment. Ilir showed Ryan how to spot patterns in the wind and clouds, how to use shadows and terrain for advantage. Finra, the blue dragon, demonstrated aerial maneuvers, and Ryan encouraged humans to observe and copy her timing. Orvin, golden and strong, taught humans to move silently and strike carefully. Even Lyra, small and quick, guided the children and scouts in precision. One afternoon, while exploring a forest near the cliffs, Ryan heard cries. A young boy, no older than 10, had wandered into a canyon. Ryan ran with Ilir, who flew overhead to guide them. The boy had slipped and injured his leg. Ryan carefully lifted him, and Ilir hovered nearby, warm air flowing from its wings, almost like healing energy. Ryan realized dragons had ways to help humans beyond fighting. They could nurture, protect, and teach compassion. Back at the village, the boy was safe, and the villagers began to see the dragons not as monsters or weapons, but as guardians. Children laughed and played near the dragons, carefully touching their scales under guidance. Humans and dragons were forming bonds, learning from each other, and understanding that strength was not just in fire or claws, it was in trust and unity. Ryan trained harder than ever. He flew with Ilir when he could, holding onto her massive back as they soared through the sky. He felt the wind, the power, and the control of flight. He realized that humans could move faster and think quicker if they followed Dragon's guidance. When they landed, he shared his experience with others, explaining how timing, trust, and courage mattered more than weapons. As humans trained, news reached the village. A Xerilian scout had been spotted near another settlement. It was small but dangerous. Ryan and a group of trained villagers took to the sky with dragons. They approached the ship cautiously. Ilir and Finra circled above, while Lyra darted between trees to observe quietly. Orvin waited behind a ridge, ready to strike if needed. The humans used what they had learned. They moved in silence, guided by the dragons. When the scout attempted to attack, Ryan signaled. The dragons swooped down, controlling the ship's movements. The humans disabled its engines using simple tools and clever timing. It was the first time humans had fought directly alongside dragons, and they succeeded. The victory was small, but it filled the villagers with hope. That night, Ryan sat near the cliffs with Ilir. The dragon lowered her head, golden eyes reflecting the stars. Ryan spoke quietly. "We are learning, but it is only the beginning. The Xerilians are coming. We must be ready." Ilir did not respond with words, but Ryan felt understanding. The dragon's calm presence reassured him. Humans and dragons were not just allies, they were partners. Days turned into weeks. Humans continued training, each day growing stronger in skill and confidence. Villagers who had once cowered in fear now practiced with purpose. Hunters learned to track with precision, farmers learned to defend their homes cleverly, and children learned to move quietly and think ahead. The dragons watched patiently, guiding but not forcing, letting humans grow at their own pace. Ryan noticed another change. Dragons were not just teaching humans, they were also learning from them. Ilir seemed fascinated by the humans' curiosity, problem-solving, and determination. Finra sometimes watched the children play, laughing silently in her own way. Orvin admired humans who were brave despite fear. Even Lyra seemed to mimic some of the humans' movements, small experiments of understanding. Bonds were forming in both directions. One evening, a strange energy pulsed in the distance. Ryan felt it before he saw it. A Xerilian scout fleet had returned, larger than before. Humans froze. The dragons circled overhead, wings spreading wide to form a shield. Ryan called the villagers together. He knew this would be the true test. If humans could survive alongside dragons, they would have to trust their training, their skills, and their courage. Ryan and Ilir led the first group. They moved with the dragons, coordinating attacks and defenses. Humans used traps, distractions, and guerrilla tactics they had learned. Dragons struck the fleet with precision, taking down ships one by one. Humans moved in perfect timing, surprising the Xerilians. For the first time, humans were not helpless. They were part of the fight, part of a team that even the strongest feared. By dawn, the fleet retreated. The villagers cheered quietly, exhausted but proud. Ryan looked at the dragons circling above. They were silent, patient, and wise. He realized that humans had grown, not in raw power but in courage, skill, and understanding. Dragons had taught them more than battle. They had taught them strategy, patience, and trust. Ryan touched Ilir's scaled chest. "We are ready to face whatever comes next," he whispered. The dragon blinked slowly as if acknowledging the promise. Humans and dragons had formed a bond forged in fire and trust. Together they were no longer weak or alone. The hidden war had begun, but humans were learning fast. The strongest race in the galaxy might come again, but they would find humans different now, clever, brave, and united with dragons who believed in them. Ryan felt hope stronger than fear. He looked at the stars and the dragons above. They had survived the first real challenge, and together they could survive more. The sun rose, painting the village in warm light. Dragons hovered silently, watching. Humans trained, rested, and prepared. Ryan knew this was only the beginning, but the bond between humans and dragons was growing stronger every day. They had learned to fight, to think, and to trust. And with dragons at their side, humans would no longer be prey, they would be survivors ready to face the galaxy. The sky darkened with an unnatural shade. Ryan stood on the cliffs, feeling the tremor beneath his feet. The wind carried a strange hum, a sound no human had heard before. He turned to see the Xerilian fleet approaching. Ships blotted out the horizon, massive and black, their engines roaring like thunder. Humans froze in fear, but the dragons did not flinch. Ilir spread her wings and let out a low roar, a sound that echoed across the valley. The other dragons followed, forming a massive circle above the village. Finra, blue as midnight, flared her wings, sending sparks into the sky. Orvin, golden and immense, hovered like a sentinel. Lyra darted between the cliffs, small but fast, watching the approaching fleet. Ryan gathered the villagers. "Remember everything we have learned," he shouted. "Move with the dragons, stay calm and protect each other." The villagers nodded, fear in their eyes but determination in their hearts. They had trained for this day and now it had come. The first Xerilian ship fired, sending beams of light that tore through trees and rocks. Humans ducked behind cover, hearts pounding. Ilir soared high, then dived, striking the ship with a controlled blast of plasma. The ship shuddered and spun, then crashed into the mountainside. One down. Ryan signaled the villagers. Hunters and craftsmen moved into position, using traps and obstacles they had prepared. The dragon struck again, disabling ships with precise fire. Humans followed, guiding smaller craft and disrupting Xerilian movements. It was chaos, but it was controlled chaos. A massive Xerilian warship descended, larger than any dragon. Its weapons glowed, ready to annihilate everything in sight. Ryan's heart raced. "Ilir, stay with me," he shouted, climbing onto her back. She lifted him into the air as the warship opened fire. Flames and plasma collided, shaking the sky. Ryan held tight, watching as Ilir weaved through attacks with skill and speed. Below, humans used the terrain to their advantage. Hills, trees, and cliffs became shields and traps. They dropped nets, created obstacles, and led smaller Xyrillian ships into ambushes. The dragons covered them, striking with perfect timing. Ryan saw the strategy come together. Humans and dragons, once separate, now fought as one. Orvin faced the largest ship directly, wings spread wide, claws ready. It struck the hull with immense force, creating a breach. The ship fired, but the blast barely touched Orvin. Finra and Lyra attacked from above and below, confusing the enemy. Humans moved in to disable engines and systems. For the first time, a human village had challenged the strongest race in the galaxy, and survived. Ryan felt a surge of pride. They were not only defending their homes, they were proving that humans could fight, learn, and survive. The Xyrillians had underestimated them. They had expected weak prey easy to crush. Instead, they found coordinated resistance, guided by dragons and human courage. Hours passed. The sky was filled with smoke, sparks, and fire. Dragons roared, humans shouted, and the Xyrillians struggled. Ryan noticed Elir face one of the enemy commanders directly. The ship was massive, but the dragon was faster, more clever. She struck with precision, causing the ship to spiral out of control and crash. When the sun began to rise, the fleet retreated. The sky was quiet except for the sound of dragons circling, wings slicing the morning air. Humans emerged from their shelters, exhausted but alive. Ryan looked around at the destruction. Trees were broken, hills scarred, but the village still stood. They had survived the greatest threat they had ever faced. Elir landed beside Ryan, wings folding gracefully. He touched her scaled chest. "We did it," he whispered. The dragon blinked slowly, golden eyes steady, as if acknowledging the truth. Humans had fought well, learned quickly, and survived. They had grown stronger than anyone expected. Villagers began helping each other, tending the wounded and repairing homes. Children looked at the dragons with wonder and admiration. They understood now that dragons were not just creatures of myth, they were teachers, guides, and protectors. Humans had learned courage, and dragons had helped them see their own potential. Ryan walked through the village, checking on everyone. Some were scared, some were proud, but all had learned something important. Strength alone was not enough. Strategy, trust, and unity mattered more. The dragons had shown them that, and humans had applied it. At night, Ryan climbed the cliffs again. He looked at the stars, watching the dragons circle above. Elir landed nearby, wings folding in calm pride. Ryan realized the battle was not over. The Xyrillians would return, perhaps stronger and smarter. But now humans had allies they could trust, skills they could use, and courage they had never known. The hidden war was becoming real. Humans were no longer just survivors, they were fighters. Dragons had taught them to think, act, and trust. Together, they had faced the strongest race in the galaxy and lived. That was a lesson the Xyrillians would not forget. Ryan felt hope. Humans and dragons had formed a bond forged in fire and battle. The strongest might strike again, but they would meet resistance like never before. Ryan whispered to Elir, "We are ready for whatever comes next." The dragon blinked, wings stretching wide as if promising the same. The village slept under the watchful eyes of dragons. Fires burned gently, signaling life and resilience. Humans had faced annihilation and they had survived. They had learned that courage, intelligence, and trust could match even the mightiest enemies. Ryan stood on the cliffs, looking at the horizon. The war was not over, but humans were ready and dragons would protect them. For the first time, the sky felt like a place of possibility, not fear. Humans had learned to fight. They had learned to trust. And together with dragons they would face the galaxy, stronger, wiser, and united. The village was quiet now, but the air still carried the memory of fire, smoke, and the roar of battle. Ryan walked through the streets, watching humans tend to their homes and farms. Children laughed softly, dragging small wooden swords as if they were warriors themselves. Dragons circled above, their wings slicing through the air, a silent promise of protection. Ryan stopped near Elir, who rested on the cliff edge, golden eyes glowing softly. "We survived," he whispered. "But we have more to learn." The dragon blinked slowly and Ryan felt understanding. Dragons had not just protected humans, they had taught them something deeper. Patience, trust, and courage. Humans had faced the strongest race in the galaxy and lived. Now it was time to understand why. Over the following weeks, humans rebuilt. Villagers worked together, guided by Ryan and the dragons. Elir showed them ways to anticipate danger, to read the sky and the stars. Humans learned to plan carefully, think ahead, and act with precision. Dragons taught them not to rush into fights, to study their enemies, and to value strategy over raw power. The bond between humans and dragons grew stronger. Children played near dragons, learning from their movements and timing. Adults watched the dragons' behavior, noticing patience, observation, and respect for others. Humans had always believed they were small and weak, but dragons taught them that strength could come in many forms. It was not just fire or claws, it was courage, wisdom, and unity. Ryan took small groups of villagers on flights with Alir and the other dragons. From high above, humans could see the patterns of the land, the flow of rivers, the paths through forests. They learned to navigate quickly, to communicate silently, and to think like predators and strategists at the same time. It was difficult at first, but gradually humans began to move with confidence, understanding the dragon's lessons. One day Ryan found a wounded fox caught in a trap. He approached carefully and Alir hovered above, observing. Ryan freed the animal and tended to its injuries. The dragons watched quietly and Ryan realized something important. Humans were learning compassion. They were learning that power was not just for fighting but also for helping, protecting, and nurturing life. Humans and dragons began exploring the surrounding valleys and mountains together. Ryan noticed that even the dragons were curious about humans' ingenuity. Finra watched carefully as humans built small shelters and tools, Lyra mimicked their quick thinking, and Orvin seemed impressed by their patience and problem-solving. The bond was not one way, humans learned from dragons and dragons observed humans with growing respect. Ryan often stood on the cliffs at night looking at the stars. He remembered the first day the dragons had appeared, the fear and the awe. Now, fear had been replaced by understanding and hope. Humans had learned that survival depended not just on weapons or numbers but on trust, courage, and intelligence. Dragons had been teachers showing them what they could become. One evening, a small group of humans approached Ryan. "We want to explore," one said. "We want to see what's beyond the mountains." Ryan smiled. This was the lesson the dragons had taught best. Courage to move forward, curiosity to learn, and trust in one another. "Then we will go together," he said. Alir and the other dragons landed nearby, ready to guide them. The humans learned more than strategy. They learned patience, observing dragons waiting for the right moment to strike. They learned timing, understanding when to act and when to stay hidden. They learned to respect power without fearing it blindly. And most importantly, they learned that even small beings could change the course of the future if they worked together and trusted their allies. News of the dragons and humans spread quietly to other settlements. Some humans who had never believed in their own strength began to feel pride. They trained not out of fear but to grow, to protect, and to explore. The bond with dragons had changed them. They were no longer fragile creatures hiding from the galaxy, they were learners, strategists, and survivors. Ryan often flew with Alir at dawn, watching the world below. The villagers were building, practicing, and exploring. Humans had learned to think like dragons in some ways, using intelligence, observation, and courage together. The dragons, in turn, seemed to smile at their progress, understanding that humans could rise above weakness if given the chance. One morning, Ryan noticed the horizon glowing. He saw distant ships approaching, not from the Xerilians but travelers and traders from other worlds. The humans did not panic. They had learned from dragons. They moved with confidence, greeting strangers with caution but also courage. The dragons circled above, silent guardians, their presence a sign of trust and unity. Ryan realized that humans had grown in ways he had never imagined. They were stronger, wiser, and braver. They had learned lessons no one could teach except through experience. Courage in the face of danger, patience in preparation, trust in allies, and the power of unity. Dragons had been their guides, but humans had chosen to learn, adapt, and survive. At night, Ryan stood with Alir on the cliff, looking at the village below. Fires burned softly, people moved with purpose, and children laughed. The sky was quiet except for the gentle flapping of dragon wings. Humans had learned the most important lesson. Strength is not just in power but in courage, unity, and the willingness to rise when others fear to act. The dragons had taught humans that even the smallest and weakest could change the course of the future. They had shown that intelligence, patience, and trust could overcome fear and danger. And humans had listened, learned, and grown. Together they had survived the strongest race in the galaxy and were ready for whatever came next. Ryan touched Alir's scaled chest one last time that night. "We have learned," he whispered. The dragon blinked slowly, wings folding in calm approval. Humans had become more than survivors. They had become protectors, learners, and allies of dragons. The village slept peacefully under the watchful eyes of dragons. The war had not ended, but humans were no longer afraid. They had learned courage, wisdom, and trust. And the dragons, silent and powerful, had shown them the path to a future where humans could rise, not by fear, but by learning, growing, and protecting what mattered. The sky was calm, but the world had changed forever. Humans had survived, learned, and grown. They had faced the strongest, stood with dragons, and discovered their own strength. The dragons had taught them well, and the humans had risen to meet the lesson. Together they were no longer weak, they were a force the galaxy could not ignore.